Many of you have wondered what it takes to actually get to the top, and you'll hear people say, this is what they do, or that's what they, try. And then as parents, we try to incorporate the right lessons for our student athletes and our kids to make sure that they understand. Today, I get a chance to speak to somebody who's really spent some time and put it together in a book, author of Trust the Grind, Jeremy Bhandari. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Brett. It's a pleasure. I had the chance to kind of read up on your career path and heavily inspiring. So it's awesome to be here.
Well, thank you. Tell me, when you did this book, the target was for younger student athletes, right? If I'm making that assumption correctly, why did you go to that population first?
Yeah, I think it stemmed from just a personal background, and what I mean by that is I just tried to think, hey, what would Jeremy have wanted when he was 10, 11, 12, that 10 to 17 range where he could have really benefited from. I grew up really into sports and idolizing professional athletes and the world class stars and going to the games. Growing up in Massachusetts, going to Fenway, going to the TD Garden to see the best players in the world. So I just kind of look back. I had always wanted to inspire people, and I thought, I have a great understanding for sports. Why not just create some sort of success habit blueprint for kids, as I call it? And yeah, it was just a personal thing where I thought, hey, there's something missing here in that, like I said, 10 to 17 range, where we could really utilize these athletes in a different light rather than harping on statistics and accolades, which makes them great, and that's why we love sports. But I thought, man, we there's something else we can be doing for that teen, young adult range, and that's what we did with Trust the Grind.
I look at coaches today, and coaches are in a really difficult place because there's a little bit of a crisis going on. There's so many voices in the coach's ear. There's so many judgments going on. There's so many institutions have very quick leashes, and they're, firing coaches if they're not winning enough. The ultimate impact on that is on the student athlete, the athlete and the pressure that they feel. And when you couple that with the athletes who are seeing, freshmen in high school or whatever, and they're being recruited so young, and they're superstars on Instagram and social media, the pressure's just building. And so it's almost like they're in a pressure cooker. What did you find and learn, the hints for these student athletes that we can share with them?
Yeah, I think it just starts with avoiding comparison to the person
Yes.
next to you, which is so difficult, especially in this social media driven world, right? You have access to everyone's life, and you feel like you get to know anyone on the planet. And it's tough. You log into your phone, everyone's going to Instagram, Twitter, seeing what the person next to you is doing. And that ultimately affects you from a mental standpoint drastically. But the biggest thing I learned from the 16 men and women that I spoke with for the project was just focusing on their immediate task, focusing on their goal at hand, and not look, like I said, not looking to the person next to them. But it's difficult to do. And one thing that really helped is identifying a path. All 16 of them identified exactly what they were trying to do. It's like I've just been talking to younger kids or people who might need a push in the right direction, and you say, the first thing I always ask, well, what do you want? What's the dream? What's the goal? What's the aspiration? What are you aiming for? And if you're not able to answer that, then we run into these trials, then we run into these tribulations, then we run into these issues, and we're constantly confused, and we wake up without a purpose, and that can be detrimental to the rest of the week. And so that the biggest thing was all 16 of them clearly identified what they wanted to do. So before I get into the tendencies that help them or the habits that they bestowed upon, it's, hey, you got to identify what individually to you, not the person next to you, not your mom, not your dad. What do you personally want to do, and what do you want to accomplish and get out of it? And I think that's the biggest thing before you even get into the sports, the practices, the mental practices, the physical training, all that stuff. What do you want to do, and what kind of impact do you want to make?
Yeah. What surprised you when you talked to them? Was there anything that caught you off guard?
There was a couple things here and there, and I've been talking about this one in particular. But when I spoke to Jason Kidd, Hall of Fame basketball player, accomplished things on the court that only Magic Johnson had done, and just a total legend in his field. And one thing that stood out in our conversation, his entire chapter was centered around self discipline. and he's breaking down. I took, thousands of shots here. I'm practicing before practice, after practice. I'm watching film, dribbling two balls, doing all the basketball practice, right? And then at the end, he's like, and then I held a diary. I kept a diary. This is something I learned during my Phoenix Suns days, which was early on in his professional career. And he goes, man, I'm tracking, writing down what I need to accomplish, my goals. When I'm playing at a high level, I'm making sure to document the foods I'm eating, the people I'm surrounding myself with, the content I'm absorbing. So when I have a bad game or don't get the necessary results that I strive for, I look back and say, when I was playing at a high level, was I napping? What foods was I eating? Who was I around? What were my practices like? Stuff like that. And it's funny when you hear the word diary, it's almost this little girl thing, right? It's like a little
Hmm.
girl scribbling in her diary, writing about the boys she likes or something. But when he really broke it down and the impact it can have on your journey, not just for an NBA player, but anyone who strives to be great in any field, it's like the easier the more you write things down, the more you identify what you're trying to accomplish, and it just becomes easier. It's like a I say this a lot, but it's like a recipe. And if you're cooking a pizza or something, you're just sticking to the recipe. You're heating the oven up to 400 or whatever. So when it comes out, you're not surprised. And that's almost
Yeah.
like how we got to approach our goals. Is like, well, hey, write down exactly what you need to do. Write down who you need to be around. Essentially, identify the ingredients, so
Hmm.
then you can easily get to the finished product.
There's no doubt about that. I want all my athletes to keep a journal, and a lot for what you described is, so at a time to look back. But one of the things I tell all my athletes is if if their if their mindset in the moment is what's making the overall determination of their progress, they're being played by emotion because we never feel like we're doing really good. But if you can look back on the paper and you can look back and see the progress you made, and you look back and you can realize how far you've come, and there were times when you had doubts, but yet you pushed through, that'll give you the inspiration, one, to let you know you could do it, but two, there's also a game plan there. That journal provides that. And to hear that from professional athletes, when we talk about that with young players, I think, oh, the pro athletes don't do that. No, they do it better. It's those
Right.
little things that are really critical and important that many of us just overlook. Did you hear that theme across many of the athletes, or was it just Jason Kidd really highlighting that?
No, I feel Dina Castor, who won bronze in the Olympics and whatnot for the marathon. She also harped on, hey, writing down not only the positives, right? Not only your
Yeah.
goals, the foods, but hey, when things are going bad, just be upfront with your emotions. Don't boil it in. Don't hold it in. So just have the valor, have the courage to just throw whatever it is on the paper. But I think another constant was I saw this Chipper Jones's section was completely centered around setting goals. And one thing from him, it's like he used this fantastic analogy, and it's a great analogy for life. But what he said is, every time I show up to the ballpark, I'm just trying to be a tough at bat each time I step in that box. And what
Mm.
that really means is, hey, focus on the immediate. He set short-term goals, he set long-term goals, but what he was really saying is, you got to be present at all times and focus on the immediate. So then, in 5 years, you can set these 5 years, 10-year goals, but if you're constantly present, if you're zoning in, if you're focusing on the immediate, you're going to be able to do damage in the long run, no matter what. If you're always
Hmm.
locked in on the moment, and that's something that he really harped on. Again, another thing with Chipper in terms of setting goals, in all 16 of them that really stood out was, I don't care about setting the loftiest goals, these exorbitant ambitions. That's what it's about. It's not about setting goals just to set goals. It's about
Yeah.
setting goals to the sky. There's no
Yeah.
limit to where you can take it. And the one thing with Chipper, we referenced I believe it was a 1997 interview. He got asked about, hey, what are your goals for the upcoming season? And at this point, he was, I think, 24 years old, and just kind of early on in his major league days. And he told the reporter, hey, I'm going to hit 320, 40 homers, 130, 140 RBIs, just these colossal ambitions. And which to many people would be outlandish to even think you could do. And we looked back at the research and we found, hey, Hank Aaron had only put up these numbers in Braves history in the 100+ years of his existence. And 2 years later, guess who joins him? Chipper Jones.
Mm.
So it's like, hey, you gotta not only set goals, say them out loud. Have the courage to say them out loud, and don't be afraid to shoot for the stars.
Was there a theme? I mean, I always tell my athletes that doubt is common, regardless of who's playing, right? Hall of Famers have doubt, beginners have doubt. Was there a theme that you saw that it was like, And I know when you're interviewing them, they probably had a platform that they were sharing their idea, and so they may have been a little bit vulnerable at times, and other times they may have projected themselves. But was there something that you saw that you went, man, I go through the same thing. I'm shocked to hear that from them.
Yeah, I think the biggest another constant and was another motif, or it was just controlling what they could control. I think like To was one of the athletes in the book, and he didn't start on his high school team until his junior year. And this is, he's I think he's third all time in receiving yards and receiving
Hmm.
touchdowns behind To. I mean, excuse me, behind Jerry Rice and Randy Moss. So it's like, and the only reason he started his junior year is because the starter got sick in the lineup. So
Hmm.
I think it's just controlling what you can control, and always being ready for that opportunity. They didn't worry about what the person next, like I started the conversation, they didn't worry about the person next to them was doing. It was just all about, how can I reach my goals? How can I reach my individual goals? What can I do so that when I am given a chance, because we're all going to get an opportunity at some point or another. And like To's story, just continue on that. He got drafted by the Niners, and who's on the team still? Jerry Rice. So he's not the guy. But when Jerry Rice went down for an injury and it was his turn to shine, he was ready. He had been doing two a days. He had been grinding in the weight room when others weren't. So all of a sudden he flourishes because he was prepared. I think the preparation was so key, no matter what the circumstance was across the board for all 16 of them. Where sometimes they're not going to get the desired results they want. That's life. That's all of us. And I think the physical preparation, but also the mental preparation, was something that stood out. And I was talking to Mike Modano, who has scored more points than any American player in NHL history. So this was an honor for me. But the one thing he said is, you know, aside from the regular season, he's outlining his 12-week plan in the off season, right? So he has a routine set for even when we're not competing, and then when it is time to compete and play against the best players in the world, he says, ahead of each event, ahead of each game, I'm sitting in my bed for 30 minutes and I'm visualizing myself making plays, visualizing where I want to be on the ice, visualizing the goalie's weaknesses, and I'm going to see myself making this pass to my teammate to set him up for a goal, and sniping here, and celebrating with my team. And just so when I go out there on the ice, I've already seen it. It's already played out in my head. It's like it's second nature when it happens. And that's something that Tim Hudson also harped on, where ahead of his pitching game, I'm closing my eyes. I'm just seeing the star players swing and miss. I'm locating pitches here. I'm getting my off speed to whatever it was. So it's just cool to kind of harp on productive or successive tendencies that anyone in any walk of life can instill. It's not
Hmm.
just about being in the NFL, NBA, MLB. It's like, no, if you want to pass a test, close your prepare, study, do the physical idea of it, but also the mental side, where you're setting aside time to lock in. You're setting aside time to project positive outcomes. So that just gives you that one step ahead to the person next to you who may have went in with nerves. And it's normal to be nervous, but if you physically prepare and you mentally prepare, you're going to be light years ahead of everyone else. And that's what each of these men and women were.
What drove you though? I mean, I know you wanted to put a book together that would fit you, but I mean, to get in front of these individuals is not
Yeah.
easy.
Yeah.
What drove you to do this? Like, what was that drive?
Yeah, I think when well, just a little bit about my background. I as soon as I graduated college at UMass, I was blessed with an opportunity to work at ESPN. So I was given an ESPN research job right out of college, and it was stationed in Charlotte, North Carolina, covering the SEC network primarily, and but helping out across the entire corporation, whether that's ESPN.com articles or helping out at Sports Center, whatever shows. We're all a team. And majority, as you know, the majority of the days were just consumed with statistics, analytics, accolades, harp on stats. This person's better than this. This team's third down rate in the second quarter. All this stuff. That is beautiful. I loved it. I loved creating content for ESPN and seeing your ideas go up on the TV, and everything is great. But from a personal standpoint, I was like, man, there's so much more to these men and women than the numbers. And these were, like I said, when I was a young kid, these were like my heroes. I aspired to be like them. I loved watching Chipper Jones and Jason Kidd just compete. So when I had the job at ESPN and I realized, there's so much more. There's something we can do, and that's when the wheels started turning in my head. Hey, that teen and young adult range could use a success habit blueprint. Could look at these athletes in a different light. So I just came up. I had a clear, concrete idea as to what I was doing, and I was able to execute it, and I was really happy with it.
Do you the the sports world right now with coronavirus? I mean, just as we're recording this, I'm watching a bunch of individuals tweeting about the Marlins having to shut down, and there
Yep.
seems to be a joy in the media when you see the negative of the coronavirus. And that builds back on the stress of our student athletes. I mean, Twitter, social media, and all the other stuff. There's so much pressure and stress out there. Yeah, I mean, you work at the worldwide leader. I mean, look, ESPN is synonymous with sports. Why do we focus so much on the negative versus the opportunities? You don't. It's only in the Olympics do we hear the feel good stories, right? And we all make fun of it. It's like, oh God, another Jeremy Gray piece. But it's true. There's so many powerful and inspiring people that are across the sports world that we never hear about. What drives that?
Brett, I wish I knew the answer. I wish I knew why I click on the 5 o'clock news and they're talking about the deaths, they're talking about the accidents, they're talking about all
Yeah.
negative gloom and doom, gloom ridden content. I wish I knew. But for some reason, I think it's just, I don't know if it's subconsciously or individuals are wired. We almost want to see people, we don't want to see anyone doing great.
Yeah.
We don't want to see the person next to us being so quote unquote better. It just feels good when, hey, that person's failing, that person's falling, when we're all really the same. We all deal with ups, we all deal with downs, and some of us are going to shine more than others. But sometimes that comes down to just the opportunity. Certain people are given more opportunity. Now, granted, they are creating the opportunities in a lot of cases. People are successful because of them. I'm not saying it's because they got an opportunity and the person next to them didn't, but I think there's just something about when we have this, like I stated in the social media world, this judgment thing and
Hmm.
comparing, and for it, subconsciously or inherently, it's just something about seeing someone better, seeing someone that comes across as more well off than us that we don't like, and I think that's why the news is so gloom ridden. I think that's why the media is always focusing on the negative, 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 and they're poking at, LeBron's doing all these great things. He's opening schools. He's, dedicating a large chunk of his, aside from being the greatest basketball player, he's dedicating a large chunk of his time to being a great citizen, a great human. And they're still breaking down,
Hmm.
oh, he has to go here to win and all this nonsense. And it's a really interesting space, but I think you just got to look at it, how you want,
Let me
everyone's
ask you this: do you
perception.
think? I mean, you were in it. I don't mean to make this a media conversation, but I think it's important for kids to understand that. Do you think that our sports and news world changed when we went to opinion versus facts? Like you look at ESPN, right? They want they don't want like I used to wake up every morning and watch ESPN to watch the highlights of baseball the night before. Now I know that in today's world I can get all those on my phone within seconds, so I don't really need it. But it was the way that Keith Olbermann and Dan Patrick or Craig Kilborn and those guys
Yeah.
captured it, right? And now it's like I go on there. Honestly I've stopped watching ESPN except for college football. I don't want to hear the opinion. Like I don't want the virtuing to hit me. And I'm not talking about the issues that we're facing in our society. I don't care if we're talking about should you order a ribeye or a fillet. I don't want somebody else telling me. Okay. But I feel like I won't watch the shows that have the opinion on them and anything. I don't care if it's weather. I don't care if it's anything because I don't want somebody to tell me. I would rather get the facts and put it together, right? I mean, I
Yeah,
don't know.
it's I totally agree. I mean, I'm
I
not
mean, we're
I'm
picking
not here
apart. Yeah, these
but
opinion shows, we're picking apart some of the silliest stuff. Like,
right.
and I'm wondering if that adds to the pressure of our young athletes. Like, you know, just today I saw a tweet, and it's a terrible tweet that came from the medical world, where a journal put out a review of vascular surgeon residents, and one of the things was, putting on social media having drinks or putting on social media pictures in your bikini. And I'm like, oh, what a terrible, terrible article, right? Doctors can wear bikinis. Okay. Nobody looks at them and goes, oh, geez, can't do that. I mean, we do that to our athletes too. It's like, why are they driving the car they're driving? Or, why can't we just celebrate the greatness of the people that are around us, right?
I couldn't agree with you more. And just like you asked about why is everything so gloom ridden? Why are we leading with the negativity? It's like, why are we focusing on things that aren't helping the kids. It's all about the next generation.
Yes.
How can we assist the next one in line? Like that was my whole goal when I wrote the book is, hey, I know you're great and everything. How can I don't care about the story, the numbers, the shot, why you made the shot. How can we assist anyone in any walk of life so that they can reach their full potential while they're here? It's not about it's
I
just
agree.
I'm not blaming the sports media world or it's just the reality of it. I
They're just
mean, look, we got
opportunists. They're just
right.
opportunists. Yeah.
And if you have if you have the chance to, hey, if you say this, if you go off on a rant about this guy missing practice, you're going to drive. It's going to get 6 million views on YouTube. Please do this. You're going to take this side. This person's going to take this side. This is what. Even if you think it's not true, hey, we got someone on stats to say, just use this stat, which isn't even accurate, but it'll come across as that you're talking stuff like that, where it's just like it's just nonsense. But that's the state of the world we're in, and I think we can climb out of it. I mean, if you get into something, you can always get out, but it's up to society. It's up to the people who are in control ultimately. But we have the opportunity, like what you do with the speaking and the motivational stuff, and you're utilizing your time in a beneficial manner, and you're talking about productive ways for anyone to grow and get better and getting the
Yeah.
best out of themselves. There's just something about sitting with someone or listening to someone who's harping on positivity, who's harping on ways to
Yeah.
grow, who's harping on beneficial content. So that's what I try to do with the book. And like I said, I looked up to these guys, and it's just cool to kind of peel back the curtain and see what it takes.
How many of them? I 100% agree with you. How many of them identified a coach as a catalyst?
That's the I love that. I love that idea because none of them in each all 16 in the conversation, nobody does it alone. I don't care how talented you are.
Hmm.
Whether that was a parent, a lot of them credit the parents. Like Chipper Jones, his parents sent him off to private school when he was in 10th grade. And, at the time you're like, hey, I got my friends here but they're like, no, you are a very talented player and this is how you're going to get become the best version of yourself as a ball player. Not only educational wise, the esteemed private school is going to be beneficial,
Hmm.
but the competition you're going to face, you're going to excel your game at a higher rate. And in our conversation, he says, he credits them for seeing that at a young age. So whether that was a parent or a lot of them with coaching, and I mean GSP, he surrounded himself with a bunch of people who knew what they were doing, and which helped elevate his game. But I think aside from coaches, from a broader standpoint, it's about your circle. Who are you
Mm.
surrounding yourself with? And Jason Kidd was a standout high school basketball player, one of the best in the country. And he's selling out. When they have big rival games in high school, they got to go and play at the local college because there's just too many people showing up. Everyone's got his jersey on. He's 16 years old, right? So he comes off a state championship after his junior year, and he had the opportunity to practice with Gary Payton, who was from the Bay Area, came back and practiced with him. And here's Jason Kidd. He's on cloud nine. He's state champion. He's the best player in the country, and he's practicing with Gary Payton. All of a sudden, they're going one on one. He can't score one bucket. Gary Payton's talking trash because Gary at this point, he's a budding superstar for the Sonics. So he comes back, he's balling on him, and Jason cried the first time they practiced. Went home and cried. He said, "Man, I can't do. What's going on? I thought I was good. But his parents said, no, you go back out there, you get better, and he continues to go back and back. He continues to train with Gary, and he gets a bucket here one day and another bucket this day, and all of a sudden, and then you look up now, and he all respect to Gary Payton, but Jason Kidd had surpassed him in the NBA as far as accolades and careers statistics. So it's like just because you're not where you want to be at this present moment doesn't mean that you can't eventually surpass anyone. Really, it's
Isn't
just
that
all
funny
about who
though?
you're around.
I think that's an important point for kids to understand is that we often see the final product, but there's
Right.
still a work in progress. But be careful to judge your moment in the race with somebody else's much further down the race,
Right.
right? I mean, we forget. Nobody ever tells those stories of Jason Kidd. I mean, I read a beautiful article about Steph Curry about how his dad changed his shooting technique when he was a freshman in high school. He had a good freshman year, but he wasn't very big, so he had to launch the ball from around waist, which made it very easy to block. So he took his entire
Right.
sophomore year and was awful. That's one of the reasons why he wasn't highly recruited, because he was so bad his sophomore year working the new shot that by the time it came in late in his junior year, he'd already kind of missed the cycle. Nobody ever
Yeah,
thinks of that.
it's just interesting because that's something that I don't care if you're a young athlete, I don't care what you want to be, is identify a path and just stick around those individuals who have more experience than you.
Yeah.
And always enter each situation, always enter each experience with them, knowing, hey, if I just soak up their information, if I soak up what they know, then I can surpass them. I can be the
Mm.
best version of myself by surrounding myself with individuals who have years and years of experience in that particular discipline. So it's just like you got to put your ego aside. And here's a kid, like I said, Jason Kidd was is the best player in the country, and all of a sudden he can't score a bucket, but he knows inherently he's getting better. And then you look at his Hall of Fame speech. Gary Payton's one of the first people he thanks in it. Just to say, hey, you helped me exponentially grow my game at such a young age, and you taught me all these things. You taught me what it takes to not only be a great player but a professional in a professional setting. So it's just not being afraid to fail, and not being afraid to struggle, and not being afraid to put your ego aside and surrounding yourself with people who have that experience so that you can ultimately grow at a faster rate, because that's what it's all about. Just your math teacher isn't teaching English, they're teaching math. Like, you got to be around the people. If you want to be good at math, you surround yourself with a teacher and you stay after school with the math teacher, right? So it's identifying that path and just sticking to it and staying focused and asking questions and just using all your time and energy to be great if you really want it.
Who did you who did you want to interview that you didn't get a chance to? I'm not saying that they turned you down or anything like that. I just who was on your wish list that you would have loved to have gotten some time with?
Um, Man. Well, as a kid, I grew up. I really liked Allen Iverson. I thought that would have been cool for
You know,
a personal standpoint.
yeah, let's talk about him for a minute. He's one of the most probably misunderstood athletes. Personal life, yes, or off the court life, chaotic. But on the court, unbelievable.
And that's
Vision
all I,
and
yeah,
speed, unbelievable.
that's all I wanted to touch on, because a lot of my stuff is just, hey, we're all human. You can
Yeah.
look at Allen Iverson however you want. I personally am a huge fan, but we all make mistakes. We all, whatever. And, I went to a game when I was 9 years old, my first Celtics game. They played the 76ers. And when you're a kid, you don't know much, but all of a sudden I see this. Who's that guy? He's 5'10, 5'11, 150, 160 pounds. Also, he's going for 40. He's
He's like
torching
flea on,
these
he's like a flea on water.
He's
Yeah.
he's going for 40. He's torching these guys who are twice his size. They double. He's effortless too. And I was like, man, you can really do anything you want if you put your mind to it. And that's why I really, so that's why I said Allen Iverson, because I saw him when I was just a kid, and I was like, man, this guy is just like anyone. He's 5'10, 5'11, 160 pounds. And he's just going off for 40, 10, and 8, whatever the stat line was. And I'm like, man, if you put your mind to something and you put in the work. I mean, Allen Iverson didn't just show up. You don't just
Yeah.
show up when you're that size and be that. He put in the work. So an athlete like him would have been great. Randy Moss would have been cool. I
Mm.
think he was just a physical freak. And Ken Griffey Jr., I always really liked
Yeah, I
him
was huge
growing
on him.
up.
Yeah.
Obviously, in a big part, I would have loved to just talk about his path coming. Obviously, he was on the big league field when he was probably 4 or 5 years old, shagging balls or whatever. But
Mm.
just to kind of get the behind the scenes of someone who sustained success for that long of time, and ultimately, will go down in history as one of the best to do it. So, learning from them, those would have been AI, Randy Moss, and Ken Griffey Jr. were probably the big three, I would say.
What about coaches? If you could sit down with some coaches, I mean, I know at ESPN you got around some coaches that were in different phases of their career, but who would you want to sit down with and just pick the mind from a coaching perspective?
Yeah, it's good. I saw you interviewed Coach Chiz
Mm.
at one point, and I had the blessing to work with him, and just
Yeah,
seeing how he prepared for shows, and his discipline and his dedication, and his overall mindset is great. I'm such a big fan.
I am too.
Um, yeah, he's awesome. So as far as interviewing other coaches, I mean, Coach K. I mean, I love
Yeah.
just it's a cop out answer, but just the wide range of athletes he's worked with, number one, but also his insight coming from the military background, coming from just years and years of demonstrated success, not only at the collegiate level but also
Hmm.
on the Olympic stage. So just chatting about, hey, how
And
are
and
you?
blending
Yeah,
egos. I mean,
right,
because early in his career at Duke, it was no one's going to leave early.
right,
To
right,
now, I mean, I hate to say it, they're just a one and done school as well. I mean,
right.
it's crazy to say that, but he's evolved. He hasn't stayed stubborn in his ideals.
Yeah, I think yeah, Coach K is and just kind of dealing with, how do you give advice to LeBron James at the Olympic? What are you teaching him, or Kobe, and what do you say to these guys who are, it appears to the common fan, who is going to tell this guy what to do? How can you help him? He's already at the top. Like, so just finding ways to continuously teach. I think that's so instrumental, because whether it's in a classroom, there's always standout students, or on the field, there are standout ball players, but how do you continuously get them to continue to elevate their own personal game? So stuff like that would be great. So I think Coach K would be a great mind. But Belichick, of course, just his dedication to being great, his dedication to being a great role model. There's a lot, I think. But Belichick and Coach K are the two that stand out.
What do you see? What do you see the landscape of youth sports in the next 10 years? I mean, the exposure is unbelievable. I mean, when I was playing, it's funny you mentioned Chipper Jones. When I was playing high school baseball, Chipper Jones was the number one pick in the draft that year.
Yeah.
It was my senior year. But there was a kid by the name of Todd Van Poppel who was bigger than him. Todd Van Poppel was supposed to be the next Roger Clemens coming from Texas. Okay. Todd made it to the major leagues, but it was never, and he didn't want to be drafted by the Braves, because at the time the Braves were garbage. And so he was drafted by the A's, which with the A's at the time were Bash Brothers, and they were
Yeah,
really,
yeah.
really good. It's funny, what you ask for is sometimes what you get. And then out of nowhere comes Chipper Jones, which I'm sure the Braves had no problem doing that. But for us, we really didn't know in high school. I mean, we played against, elite athletes in travel ball, but we didn't have, I mean, I laugh. I was looking at a roster one day of a tournament I played in. I played against Mike Hampton. It was the left-handed pitcher for the New York, yeah, for the Mets and the Astros. And I was like, oh, I didn't realize he was on that squad. And it was funny. I mean, like in college, we knew a little bit better, but in high school, we didn't. These kids today in high school know where every class ranking is. I got freshmen who know their national ranking. I'm
Oh
just
my
shocked. I'm
God.
like, my God, at freshman, I was still trying to, I hadn't even grown yet. So what do you see that transition happening? I
Yeah,
mean,
I think there's pros and cons to everything especially when it comes to the media exposure.
mhm.
So I don't, getting up every day. I've heard these stories like you're telling, getting up every day and checking your ranking. Where am I compared to the rest? I think it's a lot simpler than that. There's a bunch, as you know,
Which,
there's a
by the way,
bunch
right
of
now,
different routes.
I'm laughing on social media. The NFL players flustered over the top 100 that the NFL Network put out,
Yeah,
and flustered by the Madden ratings. I'm
yeah,
like, holy cow! Like,
yeah,
what are we doing? They need to get back to work. Like, they need to stay busy with something else.
yeah. I think it's a lot, it's a lot simpler than we make it out to be. I think like I said, the biggest thing with all these athletes, we're like, hey, this is where I want to go. How do I do it? I got to surround myself. I got to, obviously physically train every day. I got to make sure I take care of my mental health. I got to take care of the nutrition, but who do I surround myself with? How do I reach the goal? How do I get to the MLB? What do I need to do? So I think I said there's pros and cons to the media exposure, because you have the ability to go on YouTube and look up, Ken Griffey Jr. If you watch the MLB Network, they do fantastic breakdowns of just ways to improve your game that anyone
Yeah,
can adopt. So it's beautiful stuff. Whether that's Pedro talking about pitching,
I agree with you.
or whoever, A-Rod, and Pete Rose even. I know he's ostracized by the game, but if you listen to some of his interviews, the way he looks at baseball, it's unbecomfortable,
I
especially
agree
for
with
the
you.
youth. And I think he's a fantastic brain for I've gotten into a lot of his content, because I got a buddy who's now into coaching the AAU programs and whatnot. And so I'm looking at what Pete Rose is saying, and just ways to, whether that's the approach or being a fastball hitter, looking for off speed, whatever it is. But that's why I love the media, but then I also don't like it, because there's so much out there. There's so much nonsense, and there's so much distractions that can ultimately deter you from getting to where you want. A lot of people just if you look at the numbers, there's plenty of research out there. People are just sitting on Instagram or Twitter and just wasting their time. They're spending hours and hours on there. But there's always going to be outliers. There's still kids coming up who are focused, who are determined to be great, and that's beautiful. But I think the social media is detrimental, but it's also extremely beneficial in ways that I touched on with like Pete Rose, or on a picture you hear John Smoltz breaking down stuff, and you
Yeah.
have immediate access to these legends who say, hey, it's going to take you a while to get there, but if you can just adopt these particular habits, you're going to go far.
That's I 100% agree. I think MLB Network does a brilliant job of
Yeah, I
teaching the
love it.
game. I think that their perspective is great and how they teach. And I think, sharing those insights of listening to how players break down a game, or how A-Rod
Yeah.
will look at a pitcher and what he's looking for. I mean, that's just years and years, and having that level of understanding is just brilliant. Tell people how they can get the book. Obviously, go through Amazon, Trust the Grind.
Yep, Amazon's the best way to do it. Just type it in, trust the grind, it'll pop right up. Endorsed by Jason Kidd, endorsed by Paige Van Zandt over their social handles, and it's a great product for young kids who aspire to be great on the athletic field, but just in general. We're touching on athletes harping on self confidence, harping on practicing positive thinking, and just know that if you're not where you want to be, or the person next to you seems above you, quote unquote, it doesn't have to be the case in the future. We got people from all walks of life. Like we have Chipper Jones, who was the first pick. We have Jason Kidd, who was the standout. We also have Tim Hudson, who didn't get one Division I scholarship out of high school and was forced to go to community college, and tears it up there. And then all of a sudden, all the schools are calling. He goes to Auburn. You know this, being an
Oh, yeah.
SEC guy, the rest is history. So it's not about where you're at right now. It's about the future and where you can take it. And you always have the ability to become the best version of yourself. And that's what all these men and women touched on. And they did things, like I said, surrounding yourself with people who were better than them, not caring about that, documenting their journey, clearly identifying every single day they woke up what their purpose was, where they wanted to be in life, and they made it happen.
Yeah, definitely pick up a book. And coaches, it's not just for your student athletes. Make sure you read the book, because, success leaves clues. Make sure you're paying attention to them and seeing them, because, if you've ever sat down with an athlete or a coach who's at the elite level, they just communicate differently, but they're going to tell you how to do it, and they're going to share with you. Jeremy, thanks so much, and I appreciate that. And let's go out there and trust the grind.
Thank you. This has been awesome. And like you said, trust the grind.
You got it. Thank you.